All right, welcome in to another episode of the Fit Parent Podcast. I'm excited to have my client Nichole on today, who's going to share a little bit of her story and her journey to kind of get here, and then the journey that she's been on, and some of her, I feel like, mental, emotional, mindset victories. Like some of the scale and physical victories have been uh, very real and cool for Nichole, but even more than that, some of the mindset ones and these kind of revelations that she sends me are some of the coolest parts of it for her. I think is what she said, and so that's a really cool thing. So thanks for coming on, Nichole.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So always want to start here. Where did you start in this? You know what I mean? Like where we've been working together now for
Yeah.
6 months or so. Like where
hmm
when you came to me, what were the things that you had been struggling with historically, and even in that moment that were like, okay, these are the things that I would like to tackle. Putting yourself back in your shoes 4, 5, 6 months ago.
Yeah, sure. So I think the hard thing about memory sometimes is that
Yeah.
memory is the thing that happened, and then every other time we think about it. So this might be an accurate. I think my assessment of my memory is going to be um, largely impacted by the past 6 months. So
Very
as I
valid.
sort of tell
Very
this story.
valid. Yeah.
But I think seeing, I don't remember, and I remember telling you this, right?
Mhm.
I turned 39 this year, and I don't really remember a time in my life, like literally not even as a child, where I wasn't thinking about my health,
Mhm.
which is like code for weight, I think, a lot of the time, and my image and my appearance. And I have just been sick for a very long time of that background track running in my head. Um, and I think like it's important as part of this conversation to acknowledge like my inherent privilege in this conversation too. Like
Yeah, Nichole.
I don't I wear straight sizes. I've always worn straight sizes for my entire life. Um so that background conversation, it was coming a lot from myself. There wasn't, necessarily clinicians and various things telling me like this is something you need to do to be healthy. It was just like there because of goodness knows what. And so I had tried to like silence that track in the past by being very strict with what I ate, and had like some success previously with very strict diets with lots of rules.
Mhm.
Um, and then I would inevitably, surprise, get sick of it, and then go like the completely opposite direction. And then for a while I was sort of doing this like, well, to silence the track, I want to be able to just like, who cares, eat whatever I want whenever I want. And
Mhm.
that also didn't silence it. Like it
Mhm.
just made it louder in another way. And so I think I mean, look, of course I wanted to lose 10 pounds. I've always wanted to lose 10 pounds, like no matter what weight I've been. Spoiler alert for everyone, I didn't lose 10 pounds. Um,
Mhm.
uh, but so that was definitely going on. But I think like my larger why, so to speak, was just I didn't want to be thinking about food and exercise all the time. I just wanted to become a part of just I wanted to live my life. I wanted to know like how to live my life. And I remember a conversation that we had at the beginning where you said something like, imagine yourself like at your kid's wedding. Like, what do you want to be thinking? What do you want to be feeling? And I just remember thinking when you said that, like it was a little bit of a light bulb moment for me. And I was thinking, I don't want to be thinking at all about my what I'm eating or how I look or what I'm exercising. I want it to be so built into my lifestyle and so comfortable with it and not this like back and forth. Like I don't want to be at a place in my life 20, 30 years from now where I'm like, oh my gosh, it's, my kid's getting married in 6 months, or I have this big thing in 6 months. I'm going to go on this crazy diet. I just want to be like fully in the moment. And for me to be fully in the moment, I need to figure out how to not have that background track. And doing the extremes was not working.
Yes. Well, I think that you hit on something that is a common thread, which is the tension between I'm not satisfied with where I am, right? But anything that I've ever done that has quote unquote worked has damaged my relationship with food or been
Hmm.
too extreme that I couldn't stick with it. And so then I rebound to the other side of it, which is like, okay, I need to take care of my mental health and relationship
Yeah.
with food. But then you're like, well, I'm still not satisfied with my physical body. So can you talk a little bit about that tension that you lived in and maybe are still living in, and then and where you've sort of tried to spearhead a middle ground in between?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing and the biggest thing that I have really felt over the past 6 weeks is like we were gaining to this point, but then like a
Yeah.
switch was flipped or something in the past six
Hmm.
weeks where I trust the trust that I have in myself, so to speak. Um, like I think I really do trust myself, and I probably even did 6 months ago, but I didn't trust that I trusted myself, if that made sense. So I
Oh,
was
that's
like,
so well said.
thanks. So I had these conversations constantly about like, oh, is this enough? Or what are you going to do? Or what happens at this point? There was just like so much over planning all of the time that it didn't allow me to just sort of be in my body. And it's easier for me. This is another light bulb moment that I had in the past 6 weeks that like actually living at the extremes is more exciting. um
Hmm.
like it's actually for me easier to live at the extremes than to live in the middle. Like it's really
Yeah.
hard to live in the middle
Yeah,
actually.
it
Like
is.
there's something about the like Monday,
Hmm.
like the high you get from like, oh, this Monday I'm going to start,
Yep.
not eating carbs or going to the gym
Yep.
however, many hours. um or the opposite of like, I don't know, maybe what I'll call for purposes of this podcast, screw it Friday, right?
Yeah.
Like there's something like really satisfying. Like both give sort of a dopamine serotonin release in
Yeah.
different ways. Um, um, Trying to find that middle is kind of boring, to be
Hmm.
honest. And I think
Yep.
I have part of my entire life for the past couple of years, and this year specifically, is um, trying to find like what is my life homeostasis, I guess.
Mm.
Like what is, that like it will go up and down. Like I will go on vacations, but like what is comfortable for me? Where's like the zone or the pocket or whatever that I want to live in, and how do I stay there and not chase the highs and the lows? Like the highs and the lows are like extremely sexy, I think, especially from a
Yeah.
social media standpoint. And I think to some extent, I think that I'll speak for myself, that I think I'm chasing the highs a lot of the time, but I'm
Hmm.
actually like both. Like, and
Yeah.
that's a really interesting thing to figure out, I think, that like I actually kind of enjoy the lows as much as I enjoy the highs.
Mm.
It's not the like it's not the way achieving or like way failing, if you can say that. um it's just the ability to like measure distinctively what I'm doing. Like there's a comfort to be able to say, today I did really well, or
Yeah.
today I did really poorly. Like to be able to measure that and say that, like there's something just really comforting about it, even if the comfort is like, well, you sucked today, Nicole. Like at
Yeah.
least I can point to the suckage and be like, I
Hmm.
have a handle on this. Whereas like the middle is just sort of like it's great because it's flow state, and that's what like every spiritual tradition wants us to be in, but it's just really hard. I don't even know if I answered your question. I feel like I went off
No,
on 20 tangents.
no, you said a lot of really cool things there. So as you think about, like, I want to stay there for a second because I think the highs, right? Like, I do think the pendulum swings for us a lot back and forth, and the extremes are exciting. And I actually just posted about this yesterday, which was like, if you're not doing the basic things like walking and eating protein, fruits and vegetables, and sleeping and strength training, then no amount of cold plunges, green powders,
Mm-hmm.
fasts and boot camp classes are going to make a difference, because it's not sexy marketing, right? But it works. But the basics are boring. And I think about this in terms of parenting too, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
parenting, I feel like, is the ultimate be okay with, like, we kind of poo poo on the, like, basic American, like, oh, I have the house and
Mm-hmm.
the picket fence and my kids, and the minivan. And like,
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of like, okay, that feels boring. But the boring and being able to be content in the boring is the adventure and the challenge, right? It's easy to get up for a trip to Italy, right? Is how can I be okay in the day to day, is because most of life is the day to day. And
Mm-hmm.
it's easy to chase the extremes for good or for bad, right? Because this is why we talk about, like, there's something satisfying about a workout, because it's like, hey, I did a thing, right? It's more satisfying to
Yeah.
complete a workout than it is to say I hit my protein goal today. It
Mm-hmm.
just is. It's just more
Mm-hmm.
satisfying, right? Because you feel like you did something. So again, I think the extremes. I mean, neurologically, there's absolutely a response to it, either way.
Mm-hmm.
But like, steering at that middle, what have been the things for you that maybe define the flow state, the middle, the boring, the day to day? Like, what are those things that you're like, that might not have prior to this felt like that? I think that that's also a thing, because things that maybe weren't normal are now
Mm-hmm.
normal, but they feel
Yep.
boring, which is an
Yep.
interesting place.
Yes. And just, reflecting on what you said as a parent. So I have a 10-year-old and a 6-year-old, and um, uh, I do journaling in the morning, which I'll talk about in a second, because I think it gets to what one of the questions that you
Mm-hmm.
had. But one of the prompts that I often ask myself is like, what's one thing yesterday that brings you joy or that makes you
Mm-hmm.
smile? And I would say probably 60% of the time, my answer to that is snuggling with the kids on the couch watching
Mm-hmm.
sports.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like, we're a big sports family, and that is a very routine thing to happen around 7 o'clock in our house, where we like put a hockey game on or a basketball game on, and we're just like talking about our day. Um, one of my parenting hacks, especially with 2 children, is I give it. It's such a small period of time, but I give my kids 15 minutes each of n- complete attention on them. So no
Mm-hmm.
phone, no any distractions. Like, the other sibling isn't in the room, and I commit to 15 minutes of just absolutely no, just them time, and they get to pick whatever
Mm-hmm.
they want to do. And it's
Mm-hmm.
often my favorite time of the day.
Mm-hmm.
It's my son usually wants to just lay in bed and like tell me fart jokes, frankly. Um, my daughter, it's a lot of like playtime and stuff like that. And it's just like it's the it's the boring, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's not going to Disney World. It's not,
Mm-hmm.
doing whatever. It's the data. It's like it's the living the life with them.
Yeah.
Um and that, is, when I think about it, what really brings me the most joy. So just reflecting on what you said. And I do think, like, because I don't want to, sorry, before I answer your question, like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to poo-poo the boring too much,
No.
because like there is a different level of happiness that it unlocks, if that makes sense. Like
Well,
it's
that's
like
those moments are the best part of parenting,
yeah.
right? Those are the moments that nobody else gets that we
Yeah.
get as parents that you couldn't articulate to somebody who doesn't have or doesn't even have your kids. Like
Mhm.
you wouldn't be able to be like somebody's like, "How was your weekend?" and you're like, "It was great. My son told me a joke." And you're like,
Yeah.
why is that the highlight of your weekend? And it's like it's not even a good joke, but
You
like
can't
you
even
had to
tell it.
be,
Yeah.
it's
Mhm.
and there's something about like and everybody has different seasons, but that's the best part of parenting is the things that would never show up on a social media highlight reel.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you can kind of like clock into that, like I'm a very visual person,
Mm-hmm.
so I almost
Mm-hmm.
picture it um like there's a low energy there's a high energy source and a low energy source sort of this really makes sense to my brain, so hopefully it'll make sense to someone else's brain. But there's like a high energy source and there's a low energy source, and when you hit those you get like a very huge spark, and it's
Mm-hmm.
like feels great for like 2 seconds, right? And so you
Mm-hmm.
can do that. But if you can hit yourself to the middle energy source, it's constant, just like
Mm-hmm.
constant, overwhelming, like just peace and love and joy. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
just this, like, I don't know how to describe it other than just like this level of calm. And then if I when I know what that feels like, I can also know when I'm out of it too. And like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
why am I out of this?
Yeah.
Right. Or like,
Oh,
what am
so
I
good.
chasing? And it really is like, I can't, like you said, you can't describe it until like you experience it, whether it's as a parent or whatever. But just like if once you hit that, it's like, holy freaking crap, why was I ever chasing the other things?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like, it's like the boring is where it's at. Like it's
Yes.
not yeah. So anyway,
But it has to be
um
established, and we have to like know what it is. So I think that's
mhm,
and we have to live in it enough. So I think that's maybe some of what you have experienced in this is like
yeah.
why it took 4+ months for like the light bulb to go off was it was a little bit more volatile, in the
Mhm.
beginning, right? Even where we talked about it, where it was like, hey, we have to establish kind of baseline.
Yeah.
And when we think about baseline, we almost think about it as the low point, but it's really like ground zero. It's middle ground, and everything is going to be up and down from there. But like we have to know what that feels like to know whether we've tipped to one side or the other, and we're going to naturally do it. But at the beginning, it's
Mhm.
it's like boom, 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 wicked highs to wicked lows, and the middle ground is somewhere harder. And it doesn't like, okay, we're not a flat line here, but it's the oscillation is a little bit smaller, and we
Mhm.
feel ourselves go off, and you know what I mean. But it's when when you're standing on like a balance beam, right? Like if I just like
Mhm.
tip one way, I'm gonna just fall off, right? And then I go back the other way. Versus just kind of a professional gymnast is going to just be able to make small, subtle movements with their foot to catch themselves, and
Mhm.
that's where they've established what is balance, what is middle ground, and they are better able to like adjust back without it being an extreme overreaction back, which is what we
Yeah.
tend to do.
Or like, to take this analogy way too far, because that's one of my favorite things to
That's what I
do
do.
with
Yeah, that's what we do
analogies.
all the
Yeah.
time.
Is like you're on the balance beam and you decide like, you know what? I'm going to go for this bananas flip, right? Like
Hmm.
I'm going to do it. But
Hmm.
like it is a conscious choice that you have made and you've
Hmm.
prepared to do it, and it's like 2 seconds out of like a longer thing. And the
Yeah.
same thing, so like if you screw up that jump and you fall, you're like, "Okay, cool. I made the choice to do that. I
Hmm.
knew there was a possibility that I was going to fall on my face." And like that was all a part of it. Like it's that intentionality, I think, like bringing it
Yes.
not just like but
Yeah.
like that,
Yeah.
like very just and maybe that is maybe that's the word that I'm
Mm-hmm.
looking for with the boring, is like living in like the intentionality pocket so much
Mm-hmm.
that like you don't even realize you're there anymore. Like it's just
Yes.
part of the day. It's just like what you do. Um, but to
Well,
go back to something that,
when
oh,
everything's
sorry.
on purpose, sorry, no, well, just to
No.
put a bow on that, when everything's on
Mm-hmm.
purpose, then it becomes a lot more freeing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Versus it's the proactive versus the reactive. When I'm in a
Mm-hmm.
place where, it's like when people are like, how do you, I go out to dinner with folks as a trainer, and people are like, how do you, eating pizza or drinking margaritas? It's like, this is part of my plan. Like, it's not,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not off my plan. Like, this is part of my plan. It's on purpose. In the same way that eating chicken and vegetables and things like that are on purpose, right? All of it's
Mm-hmm.
on purpose. And that
Mm-hmm.
changes it from like, this is good or bad to like on purpose versus not on purpose. And
Yeah.
and so that's, I think, a little bit of what you've talked about, which is like, I'm in control of to what extent I'm going to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And I have the choice to be like, hey, and we've talked about this, the dial it up, or am I going to dial it down? Like, the music's always
Mm-hmm.
playing, but am I going to go louder, or am I going to go softer? And that just determines what am I in the mood for? And I can
Yeah.
make that choice, but it's on purpose.
Yeah, and I think it's, again, like being a visual person, like this is what came into my mind when you were talking about that. It's like the high and the low, right? And you want to be kind of like in the, to
Yeah.
hook into the flow of the pocket of the intentionality. Like have found that the more that I'm in that, the wider that pocket gets too.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and it starts to actually kind of like touch the
Mm-hmm.
highs and the lows to some, like there is,
Yes.
it doesn't just stay, you're not just like,
Mm.
the balance beam doesn't stay like this. Like the balance beam actually just becomes the floor at some point, like, and you're not
Yeah.
balancing anymore. So
Well,
um
that's where the skill comes in, because for
mhm,
you, for me, I don't know about for you, but for me, if I was on the balance beam, that thing would feel like it's
mhm,
a half an inch thick, right? Like, my
mhm,
balance is not there. But to, Sean, whatever her face is, Sean Johnson or Simone Biles, right? It feels like the floor because they're so used to it that they can do things on there that I couldn't do even on the floor, but they're so comfortable with that middle ground that they can. Man, we are crushing this analogy, right? But to them, they have established, like, it's all a matter of, hey, how thin is that razor's edge for you for
yeah,
normal? And the more experience you get, the more you're able to give yourself leeway to one way or the other and not worry that you're going to fall off,
yeah, the wider it
right? Like,
feels,
the
yeah,
wider it feels, and
mhm,
the more room you have to, like, oh, I'm gonna go on vacation and I'm just gonna eat whatever I want
mhm,
on purpose, and I know that I can come back and do this. Versus, if you're not super comfortable with it, you go on vacation, you eat whatever you want, you come back and it takes you 4 weeks to get back on track.
mhm,
That's the difference between the comfortability of, hey, where's how much control do I have over this pocket? Oh,
yeah,
just brought that
yes.
full circle at the end. What a win. What a
I'm just gonna take the analogy and
CrossFit.
just like
Just everything
until
we
it's
got out of it.
totally, just totally
Yeah.
dry. Yes.
It's
So
my favorite thing
um
to do.
but I do think, like, going back to
Mm-hmm.
probably a question you asked like 25 minutes ago, because then my
Mm-hmm.
brain, like some of the more like boring or consistent
Yeah.
things or pocket things, like until probably 4 months ago, if you had said like go on a walk, I would have said, what an enormous waste of time.
Yeah.
Like I have taken walks before and like vibrated the whole time because I'm like, I should be running right now. Like there's
Yeah.
literally no point in me walking. Like if I'm going to take 20 minutes to do
Mm-hmm.
something, right? And like if anyone is listening to this, like I've run a marathon before, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy running, or at least I convinced myself at some point that I enjoy running.
Mm-hmm.
TBD if that's true. But yeah, like I remember just thinking like I like this is an enormous waste of time. Like it actually felt like I don't know, like I was losing something by walking. Like that was
Yeah.
what my mentality was. And so when you were like, "Oh yeah, one of the best things you can do is walking." I was like, "Okay." Um but now I love walking and it has almost nothing to do, I mean nothing to do with, it has actually, it has nothing to do with weight loss at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I do this with my kids now too. Um, Sometimes I go walking by myself. Sometimes I go walking with the kids. I love being in nature anyway. So this sort of like just, you know, plays to my natural inclinations. But like whenever I'm just like feeling like crap, or not whenever because I can't abandon my children,
Mm-hmm.
but like whenever I have childcare and feel like crap, or just like need a new perspective, or sometimes I'm just feeling good, you know, you just want to
Mm-hmm.
take that goodness out, like to take a walk. And like, I mean, I get, if we wanted to think about it, which I don't anymore, which again is like part of being in the pocket, like I get consistently like 12,000 steps a day and I don't
Mm-hmm.
think about it anymore. I just like,
Yeah.
it's something that I enjoy. It's
Mm-hmm.
something that like, it makes me feel very grounded. And so, and actually one of the things I do that I'm sure I look like a crazy person, but like I always find a piece of nature to touch when I'm out taking a walk. Like it might be a tree, it might be a leaf. Sometimes it's just like a part of the ground, but just to like, it brings me so much calm to kind of anchor myself in the like shared energy of nature, and to be like, this is the like, there is no point to this besides this, if that makes sense.
Yeah. 100%.
Like it's not about the 12,000 steps, or it's not about, I don't know, the calories that we're tracking or whatever. It's like,
Yeah.
this is the point. The point is this, exactly what I'm doing right now. There's no
Yeah.
larger thing here. Um, so like that was, I think, one of the first mind shifts that came, was just like, oh, I really like this. And you kind of gave me permission to like it,
Mm-hmm.
because you were like, oh no, it is good for fat loss. And I was like, cool, I don't believe you, but you're my coach. And so I'm going to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And then it turned into like, oh, this is like we've talked a lot about, and I'm very open with the fact that seasonal depression is really, really tough for me.
Mm-hmm.
And this year has been way better. And like I haven't changed my meds. I haven't done anything like differently with my psychiatrist or my therapist. And I really think a lot of it is the walks in the morning, like getting the
Yeah.
sunlight. It's one of the first things I do.
100%.
Um, get the sunlight, just get out, like get that groundedness with nature. So having that, I think, going back to the background track, like it kind of, that's a boring thing that in a lot of ways it was like, I don't know. I say to some people sometimes, like at work or various things like that, I'm like, this tree doesn't care that we have a project in a month that's due,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like it was here way before that, and it's going
Mm-hmm.
to be here way after that. And so
Mm-hmm.
like just kind of like reminding myself of that every morning instead of having the like back and forth is very
Mm-hmm.
grounding for me. So there's that. And then I took that one step further, like 2 months ago. I'm not even sure that we've talked about this yet, Jeff, but where and again, like this is not easy for everybody. I'm married to somebody that this would be torture for, but like I naturally wake up very early. So like I'm up at 5 o'clock in the morning most of the time. And before I was just like laying in bed or like screwing around on my phone or like answering work emails or something. And now like the 5 to 6 o'clock hour is like sitting down with a cup of coffee, journaling, reading something that I'm not normally going to be able to read. And like, I don't want to, I think it's easy to be like, and I actually think there's a book called The 5 a.m. Club or something like that, where it's like the answer to
Mm-hmm.
everything is to just get up at 5. And it's like, no, that's ridiculous. But for
Yeah.
me, I am up at that time. That was an hour that I was just like back to intentionality, right? Or
Yeah.
like that I was just like doing God knows what with. And
Yeah.
now I'm like, this is what makes me happy. This is what brings me joy in the morning. This is what brings me groundedness in the morning. So this is what I'm going to do. And
Yeah.
like, guess what? It works.
Yeah.
So yeah. Like without even getting into, because I was someone that like regularly exercised. So without even getting into like the kind of like, I don't know, the things you're supposed to do or whatever.
Yeah.
Like I what set me up for success or what set me up for this mind shift change, or I don't know, some combination thereof. It's like the walking and the mindfulness and the journaling and the stress reduction. So yeah, those are some of my boring things. And I say that too because like I actually like lifting weights. Like I'm a weirdo,
Yeah.
so that's like not boring for me.
No, well, so I think that gosh, there's so many good things there. So I think the intentionality piece of this and the underratedness of setting yourself up for success. So I think I've said it on this podcast before, but like fish can't swim on land. Right? Like we put fish in water and they do what they're meant to do. Right? So the more we are set up for success, right? So the idea, and I don't care what it is, right? But the idea of you wake up and you do something on purpose that you set your intention for the day. You're doing the day on purpose. And you do the walk and it's on purpose. There's a reason for it. There's something to that where it's like, okay, the rest of things, like if we focus on a few things, then those things make it a lot easier to do the rest of the things, right? So the fallout, like the positive fallout of waking up and having intentional time in the morning and, you know what I mean, going for a walk and all of these things are a lot of other things that you do throughout the rest of the day that you might not have done. Right, this is the butterfly effect. We don't want to
like the
play it out
snowball
too
effect
far.
or this, yeah.
Where we don't like, all right, what would it be like this way or there? But it's from these few actions, right? I'm much better set up to do other actions.
Yeah.
Versus,
or I'm just like I just feel better.
Yes.
Right? Like who cares what I do next? I don't even care what I do next. I just feel good.
But that's what it is. Like I don't care what I do next, but I feel good. Therefore, I do other things. Right? It's like if you ever wake up. This happened to me the other day, yesterday, and my alarm. I had set a new alarm on my phone. Right? So I got a new, and it defaulted to no sound, and so I didn't wake up when I expected to wake up because my alarm didn't go off.
Yeah.
And so I woke up when I was supposed to be doing something, right? I was supposed to be somewhere. And everybody knows that feeling when you wake up and you're like, I shouldn't be awake. Like I should have been awake already. Like this is not a good
the
feeling.
Home Alone moment.
Yeah. And you're just like, nope, not good. And you look at the clock and you're like, I should have been somewhere 3 minutes ago and I am currently in bed, right? Like those moments where you're like, and it's just drops and that jacks up your day, right? And you can try to redeem it and like, it doesn't mean that the day's written off, but like you're thrown off for the day.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is the polar opposite of that, right? Where by winning the early moments, right, you feel better. And when you feel better, you're more likely to do other things that you feel better. This is like the stress eating cycle or poor sleep cycle that we've talked about. Like if I'm tired, right, my likelihood to want to go work out is not great. It's not that the poor sleep is, this is what derailed me. It's the fact that I don't want to go do other things because other things have affected me negatively. And so I'm starting the day at a deficit versus starting the day at a high and then just building on that, right? It's 1 degree slope going up versus a 1 degree slope going down. It doesn't feel like a lot in the moment, but they stack up over the course of the day. So embracing those boring things that set you up for doing other things throughout the day on purpose. So when we think about, go ahead, or do you have, I wasn't sure if you heard me there.
Oh yeah, sorry, you froze for a second. Sorry. I was just gonna say, like, I think the one of the things that I have had to like come to grips to terms with as I am in middle age. It's funny, my just a brief aside, but my husband was telling me this story the other day, and then he was like, and then this middle-aged white lady cut me off in her car, and I was like, just to be clear, you're married to a middle-aged white lady. You know that, right? And he was like, you're not middle-aged. And then he was like, oh my God, we're middle-aged. And I was like, I hope that we have a little bit longer, but like right now, this is, if I'm half my life, I'd be 78 when I die, which is like a
Yeah.
pretty normal, like that would be great.
Yeah.
I would love to live longer than that, right? But like we're like clearly in middle age right now. And
Yeah.
part of that is like um surrendering to the fact that I am I am a system and I am part of a system, right? So like I think it's very tempting to, or at least it's very tempting to, for me to think that like, oh well, this is all willpower and like my alarm can go off, or like one of my kids can call me stupid, or
Mhm.
whatever, and then I'll just like get on the happy train because
Yeah.
like that's what I am doing. And it's like, no, all of those things affect the system, right? Like you can't, like talking about homeostasis or whatever, you can't like willpower yourself away from those things. They happen to you. And
Yeah.
so it's sort of like it's not willpower about like overcoming them or like something like
Mhm.
that. It's the knowing yourself. And for me, I'll speak for myself, sorry, for trusting myself enough to know that like I I am a system and I know how to get back into homeostasis.
Mhm.
And, it's not like telling myself that everything is okay. It's just like trusting myself and trusting the system that I have set up for myself, which again makes it sound very boring, but
No, but I think you said something that's really important because you said it earlier, which is and it was an interesting way that you said it, which is I didn't trust that I trusted myself for a while,
hmm
right? And so now you're in a place where you trust that you trust yourself, and
hmm
it's a little inception-y, but it's the idea of like our our actions tell a story. So like we believe in ourselves or don't believe in ourselves based on what has historically happened, right? if
hmm
i if i am a certain way, right, you kind of expect what has
yeah.
always happened, and so to fly in the face of that is hard because historically you said like you lived on the extremes,
hmm
and now establishing like this is weird because I'm not on the extremes, and any moment that I've kind of been not on the extremes, I've always gone to the extremes. It's again, let's bring it back to the analogy because I'm just a big fan of it. Right? So it's the idea of like the first time I'm on the
hmm
balance beam and I jump and I catch myself and I don't
hmm
fall off. It's like, wait a second. Like
How did
it's a
I do
weird
that?
it's
That was
like
cool, but how did
it
I
was
do it?
cool.
Yeah.
How did I and like did
Yeah.
I feel like I should have fallen off. Like, could I actually do that? I don't know. Like, could I do it again?
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm actually good at this yet or if I just got lucky. You know what I
hmm
mean? Because I've never experienced success before. I'd
hmm
always experienced falling. And so the new experience of like, I can trust myself to do this is an interesting thing. And then to go one step further, how we get into doing new things is I trust that I can trust myself. I trust that if I feel like I
Yeah.
can do it, then I can do it. And that's a next step, right? There's trusting myself to do what I said I was going to do, which is hard, right? I have to like do it repeatedly, but then to get to the point where you say I'm going to try something new, and I trust that if I say I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it
hmm
because now I have the track record of doing what I said I was going to do, whereas historically I haven't had that track record.
Yeah,
Did I
sorry, you
freeze
froze for
again?
me again. Yeah, sorry, you were
Oh,
back. You're back.
weird.
Yeah. No, no, no. I think I heard enough of it. Like, or we were on the same page. Is yes, the trust in yourself. Like it's a crazy sentence to say, but to be able to, to say that and to get it, I think. And I do think like just acknowledging um that, my routine or like my setting myself up for success, if
Mm-hmm.
you had told me that that's what would set me up for success 4 years ago, I would have said, like, that's great. I love that you made that time machine. And I have a 2 year old and a 6 year old, and that's
Mm-hmm.
insane. I can't do that right now. So
Mm-hmm.
I think, like, also being very realistic about your kind of like capacity of, okay, I'm
Yeah.
sticking with the balance beam, like how wide your balance beam like needs to
Mm-hmm.
be, and like when it can
Mm-hmm.
get bigger and when it can get smaller. And I remember when I had just gone back to work after having my second child. So I had a 6 month old and I had a 4.5 year old. And I remember a couple months into work, I wrote down a post-it to myself. I'm big on post-its. I wrote down a post-it to myself that said, taking care of yourself starts with peeing when you need to pee. And that was a commitment that I made to myself. Like,
That's the most relatable parenting thing I've ever heard in my life.
but not just the thing about it was I wasn't just doing it as a parent, I was doing it as a worker too. So like
Yeah.
sitting in meetings, right? Like how many of us like sit, I'll speak for myself. I sit in
Mm.
so many meetings and or I do the like, oh, I'm just going to like I made up this like world where peeing was a reward. Like I'll do like 2 more pages of writing and then I'll let myself go to the bathroom. And
Oh.
the reason that I'm telling this story is one, because it's ridiculous and I'm a ridiculous person. But two, because like I think about that moment in time and writing that post-it a lot as like the moment where I reclaimed myself
Mm-hmm.
in parenting, because I didn't do what I normally do, which is like come up with a plan to like whatever, or like go to a spa, or like, sit under my desk and cry.
Mm-hmm.
There was like, thank goodness for whatever was inside of me that was like, all you need to do right now is commit to peeing when you need to pee. Like, just trust me. That's all you need to do right now. And to be able to do that, and granted, not always follow through with it because that's life, but to be able to do that, like one thing and make that one commitment to myself, I really, really think that, like, when you talk about like the snowball effect or
Yeah.
whatever, there was so much that came after that by just doing that one thing. So, yeah, that's,
I
I
I
sometimes
love
say
that
that. And
so much.
okay.
No, I really do, because it's such a good illustration of what we're talking about here, which is
Hmm.
in the moment that feels ridiculous,
Yeah.
right? Like, and it feels like this shouldn't be something I need to like remind myself to do. This feels like too basic, right? There's a world more than that.
Hmm.
But the idea of, and this is, but I think why people live in the extremes, this is the boring, right? Like people live in the
Yes.
extremes because it's like, I committing to peeing is not enough for me to say
But
that
it
I'm taking
is. Yeah.
care of myself, because, but it's a I'm doing it,
Hmm.
right? That is a baseline thing. And now I'm doing the thing. I'm doing it. And now, hey, go me. I'm
Yeah.
peeing when I need to pee. What else might I be neglecting about me? And then you
Hmm.
feel empowered and capable of doing that thing when you might not have otherwise, if you didn't start with the low hanging fruit, which is, I'm gonna pee. You know what I mean? Like, start where you're at versus feeling like we need to do all the things. And so then this comes back to the other thing that you said about walking, or all of these things, which is a really great example of, this is the thing right now. Like, this, the walk is the purpose versus thinking about what can this do for me in terms of long, right? That's a shift completely,
Hmm.
right? Where we stop working out to burn calories, where we stop walking to hit a specific step down, when we stop tracking our calories or our protein to like hit a specific number, but we start doing those things because they're good for us, right? And it has value outside of what can this do for me in terms of my weight loss, my fat loss, and things like that. It doesn't mean that they're not going to do those things, but when we
Hmm.
shift the goal or the target of the process, and we start to embrace the process of it, the outcome is going to naturally come from that, right? If you're walking 12,000
Yeah.
steps a day, that is a positive thing towards fat loss. But just saying I'm going to do 12,000 steps a day because I want to lose fat is going to be difficult unless
Mhm.
we start to like actually enjoy walking
Mhm.
and appreciate it for what it is versus just for what it can do for me. Think about relationships, right? Like no positive relationship in our lives is just about what can this person do for me. It's
Mhm.
rather about like, can we spend time together, right? If it's all
Yeah.
about what can this do for me, it's a negative relationship versus let's spend time together. That's a positive relationship.
Yeah, and I think sorry to keep, focusing on my bodily functions. But I do think, for the past 6 years, because it's been 6 years now since I wrote that post-it. Um I, to this day, and this happened to me yesterday, if I am not peeing when I need to pee, I'm like, something is wrong. I am not in
Mm-hmm.
touch with my body, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
so there are like certain markers or the same things in a relationship when you're like, when when I shift from like in my marriage, a lot of the time, if I shift from like what is going to make this person happy, like
Mm-hmm.
can I anticipate what's going to make this person happy, and then like make to just being there and
Mm-hmm.
just like being with them, like when I am like that background track of like whatever pleasing, to me I'm like, oh, there is something going on here, right? So I think like, again, it's such a simple thing, but figuring out like what are those indicators for me that show me
Mm-hmm.
that I am not listening. And for one of them, for me, it's going to the bathroom, like truly to this
Mm-hmm.
day. Like if I go do an 8 hour meeting, I'm like, oh gosh, something has happened. So
Mm-hmm.
um yeah, I think those. And then I just wanted to say too about like all of this, like I feel like I've spent the last 50 minutes talking about like, my enlightenment over the past 6 months, which like has been great. And I took my kids to the Y 2 weekends ago and saw myself in the mirror with a bathing suit on. And I was like, ugh. So, like, it's not that that's gone. Like, I think that that's important too. Like, to say, like, that's not the background track, like, still exists and it still asserts itself a lot. But I know that that's not me anymore, if that makes sense. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I hear it and I'm like, yep, I hear you. And we're not going on a diet on Monday, right? Like we are
Mm-hmm.
living in this pocket. You are loud and you want to get my attention, and you did. And I hear you. And I have made a choice to like live in this pocket. Like both
Mm-hmm.
things are true. And I think for a long time I was thinking that like I would reach a state of spiritual like wellness nirvana, that like I would
Mm-hmm.
go by myself in a mirror and be like,
Mm-hmm.
you're hot shit. Sorry, I
Mm-hmm.
swore on your podcast.
I don't care.
And
You're
that's
great.
just like not gonna happen, or maybe it
Mm-hmm.
will, right? But
Yeah.
in the meantime, I can still I can still have that and still be
Mm-hmm.
like, yep, okay, just like you have a bad day, right? Like you just like you
Mm-hmm.
have that day where you don't, your alarm doesn't go off and you're like, yep, okay, I'd like, that's still a background track, or that's like still a bad thing, and like I'm still in the pocket. So anyway, I
Mm-hmm.
just wanted to bring that up too.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense in the sense of like your like this is going to be something that is maybe a little bit of a strange thing for people to hear, right? So and forgive me if this sounds immodest. Um, I would be probably by most
I was
people's
just talking about peeing,
standards,
so go for it.
yeah,
Yeah.
I would be by a lot of people's standards considered to be a fit person, right? To have a fit
Hmm.
quote unquote body, right? What by whatever standard you want to do. Are there people who are maybe a little bit more fit than me, by Instagram worthy magazine standards, sure. But you know feel fine, right? That does not mean that I walk around every day and look in the mirror and don't see a moment where I'm like, dang man, that's not great, right? So these
Yep.
internal voices are not, there's no, and also to go one step further, I know bodybuilders who have abs that could cut glass and skin that you can see every fiber of their muscles. It's so thin because there's nothing underneath. Those people have the highest percentage of body dysmorphia disorder of any population in the
Hmm.
world because
Hmm.
it's there's not a correlation with the exterior necessarily, like to a point, right, with how
Mm-hmm.
you feel about yourself. Like you are never going to be absent the moments where you're like, yeah, man, that's just not what I want to do. But it's not the thing, right? It's not the stressor, it's not the moment, it's how we respond to it that is the
Yeah.
indicator of our long-term success. So the idea that you can look in the mirror and be like, that's not where I want to be yet. You can also probably look in the mirror and be like, okay, that's a different place than where I started.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's how you responded to it, which was not, I'm going to go on a diet on Monday. And
Right.
that's the interesting thing for most people, because we can let how we feel determine what we do versus being what you're talking about in the pocket, which is I do this and
Mm-hmm.
I know that I have the capability, if I want to pursue that further if I want to. But we've talked about this. You're like right now, being okay with just doing the boring is the goal for me. That doesn't
Yeah.
mean that I won't go there, right?
Right.
And or eventually pursue that more, but like because I've you the trust that you trust yourself piece, like because you're like, if I go there too far, it's very easy for me to topple over right now. Even though my balance beam has gotten wider, if I go too far here, then I'm gonna, I might topple over. So I'm gonna stay in the middle because I don't want to go too far there. And that doesn't mean that all is hunky dory, or you're like, hey, I don't have a goal to eventually do that. But it does mean that the process piece of it and our response to how we feel doesn't take us one way or the other, right? Like a breath of wind
Yeah.
doesn't push us off the balance beam.
Yeah. It's just a thought or a feeling, and it's not who I am, right? Like it's
Yeah.
not. Yeah. Yes. Absolutely. Yeah.
And it's okay to have those feelings, I think, and it's a
Oh yeah.
normal thing to do that. And I think when we get into the place of like, I must always feel okay, is where we start to, again, bring, make the balance beam a little bit more volatile side to side, where recognizing that it's a voice, it's an outside voice, and I'm not in control of how I'm not in control of necessarily my immediate gut reaction to how I feel when I look in the mirror, but I'm in control of what I do in
Hmm.
response to it.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Absolutely. And it feels good not to beat myself up for
Yeah.
my thoughts, right? Because like going
Yeah.
back to the system, like if I started to do that, it like cascades into, oh, it cascades into dieting on Monday,
Yeah.
right? Or like whatever. But to
Mm-hmm.
just be like, yeah, yeah, I don't love that. And like come at me, voice, or
Yeah.
whatever, or don't,
Yeah.
or just say like, hi visitor, so
Mm.
I could talk
Well,
about this a lot more, but I know we've talked
yeah,
for like an hour
yeah.
already.
We can kind of wrap up here, but yeah, the to kind of put a pin in that piece is it's we can, again, the pendulum piece of it, which is one side is I hear the voice and then I respond to it, react to it, I do something, right? The other side
Mhm.
of it is I hear the voice and I feel guilty that I hear the voice, right?
Mhm.
And I just like, oh, I shouldn't beat myself up, I should just be okay. and
Yes.
and there's a little
Mhm.
bit of like, hey, we have to steer that middle ground a little bit there, because then we go the other direction in that scenario where it's like, no, I'm gonna love myself, even if you don't feel great.
Yes. Yes. And you know what that? Yes. Yes. It's back to the whole
Mm,
uh, like you said, putting a bow on this or coming full
yeah.
circle. Like the reason that I started working with you is because I
Mm,
didn't want to do that anymore. I didn't want to um I didn't want to be controlled by, and I didn't want to be controlled by them, but I also didn't want to beat myself up about the reactions. It's just like
mm,
what do I need to do to be at a place where, and I'm just going to say it again, where I trust that I trust myself. Like it, it it's
mm-hmm.
it, getting back to the parenting, one of the best feelings I had with my second kid was like 2 days after I came home from the hospital with her. I just had this feeling where I was like, oh, I know how to do this. Like with your
Mm-hmm.
first kid, maybe it's different for you because you came
Mm-hmm.
back with two the second time. But with the first kid, I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I don't
Yeah.
like, how do I? And then with the second one, I mean, of course, she's totally different and things change. But I just remember thinking like, I'm a good mom. Like I
Mm-hmm.
know how to do this. I know how to do this. And so
Mm-hmm.
having that same realization, like, I'm good. I know how to do this. Like we're
Mm-hmm.
good is really just all the feels. All the feels.
Mm. I love that. No, I think that that's a really kind of a great way to finish, which is I know how to do this. And so when you look in the mirror and you don't feel great, or you're in a place where you're like, maybe it's not, whatever, you're not going to get too high. You're not going to get too low, because you're like, I have
I
confidence
know how to do it. Yeah.
that I know how to do it. And like, if I wanted to, I could do something a little bit more extreme right now, but I don't want to, because I don't want the cost of that
Mhm.
on my life and my family and my energy and how I feel, right? I feel good here. I'm okay with this going slower. And it's okay if you want it to go faster, but you're like, I know what to do. I know
Mhm.
exactly what I like. We've talked about this. You're like, I know exactly what I would do if I wanted to ratchet this up,
Yeah.
but I'm also content to like not ratchet it up right now and
Mhm.
go at a slower pace and just kind of be where I am, because this feels fine. Like this feels
Yeah.
good. And
Feels really
I'm
good.
like cool. I'm cool to like, if the outcome happens in 6 weeks, 6 months, or 6 years, that matters a little bit less to me than my experience along the way.
Yeah, or never. Like it's
Yeah.
great. Yeah. Yes. So,
Yeah,
yeah, absolutely. Like and everything is changeable. So, yeah.
for sure.
I know what I'm
Love
doing.
it.
Gosh, that feels so good to say.
Yes. That was one of my favorite messages you said. Like when you came back from Christmas and you were like, "I'm not worried about it. Like I know how to eat. I know what to
Mhm.
do. Like this isn't.
Mhm.
I'm not panicking. I'm not overhauling it. I know what to do, and I can just do the thing."
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, Love it so much. Well, Nichole, thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing your story. I
Yeah,
hope it
thank
was
you.
relatable. If you have listened all the way through and something resonated from the podcast with you, just shoot me a message. Would love to hear it. Would love to maybe pass it along to Nichole so that she kind of heard it and you know.
Or comment below, I'm going to pee when
uh,
I need to pee. There we
Yeah,
go.
there we
Just
go.
do that
I'm gonna
today.
pee
Just
if
start
I need
somewhere.
to. There we go. I'm gonna pee when I need to pee. I love that. Yeah, if you're on, I think you can comment on YouTube. I have no idea what you can
I
do on
don't know how to
podcast
do. I
sites,
don't
but
know.
or just send me a DM, and if you do it like 3 weeks after this comes out, I'm gonna forget that we had this conversation. And I'm gonna be like, that's an odd thing to say out of context. So
Yes.
just say Nichole say Nichole, and then I'm gonna pee when I need to pee, so I don't just think, okay, that's great, because I'll forget that we said
It's
that. I'll be
important to
like,
have a
good for
legacy.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm glad I
good for
have
you.
this. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate
Thanks.
everybody listening. If you like more of these, let me know. Comment, rate, review, all the things that I don't know what to do with podcasts, but thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you soon.